Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Well, happy Father's Day. We've got a 96% male audience, so I'm sure we've got plenty of dads tuning in. I hope you got to catch up with your old man or your grandpa, as I did today, but we've got plenty of news, so let's get into it. We do welcome a few hundred new subscribers again this week, a little bit quieter than normal, but it has been a slow news week. We had some great episodes, some great guests this week, which I'll touch on during the episode, but let's get into the local news where Woolworths to close 30 big W stores as profits are tumbling. This seems to be a similar theme in retail in Australia. David Jones to aggressively close stores. I think they had a 42% profit downgrade in reporting season. So it is these retail giants are hurting as more people shop online, but I think the consumer is just spending less, and that's because of that disposable income, as we've continued to talk about. So look, the rest of the world, the developed countries, have really seen that acceleration, whereas Australia is just stagnating or even falling backwards in recent years, and there's no doubt about that when you look at what's going on in the wider economy. Now, this week we got a story out from ABC about banks referring their customers to food shelters, food banks, to help them pay their mortgage. So it's pretty crazy stuff when you think it's coming to this, and people maybe got those mortgages that they couldn't afford, and now reality hits them pretty hard. So I hope no one out there is suffering, but I think at the end of the day, we have to blame the banks and those people that didn't do their checks and assess people properly, and now they can't afford their mortgages. Now, BlueScope Steel has been sued for allegedly dealing with rivals to rig the steel price. So we often hear about this in different commodity markets or the banks and FX, but it seems to be the case in steel, and iron ore price being really high recently. So look, maybe they've been trying to keep that higher, and it has been low, and now it's artificially high. Let's see where the dust settles with that one. But in terms of the commodities, Australia is going to really benefit from this trade war with China. So racing to develop rare earth plants, and we've got plenty of mines here in Australia. I've covered this in a previous video, so maybe that is going to be one section of the Australian economy that does benefit from the trade war, but there's plenty of others that are going to hurt. Now, in terms of Australian listed companies, I just wanted to mention that the ASX is on track to switch over to blockchain in 2021. So replacing the old chess settlement system, they've partnered up with VMware here. So let's see if they can get this out, because that's not too far away. And that's pretty big news. Again, just getting blockchain under people's nose. Now, Chris Joy, he's one guy that I do respect his opinions. He's called the market fairly well, but he's really bullish on housing, and he thinks that the boom is back. So I don't necessarily think the boom is back. I'm not sure if the wider economy justifies that. We've seen a big collapse in construction recently, and I just don't think that reduced supply and new units coming online is going to offset what we're seeing going on in the wider economy and people not getting wage growth. Now, this was a fantastic article I read on the AFR about, Lowe and Frydenberg really split on stimulus. So the Reserve Bank, the Central Bank of Australia, they don't want to lower interest rates any further unless they have to, because we're not in recession. We're already at 1%. And Josh Frydenberg saying, well, we're not going to spend more. We're so close to running a surplus. We're already spending a fair bit. And this is kind of coming like Trump and Powell over in the US, where I think both are going to blame each other if things get nasty. And this is a situation which is playing out in a number of countries around the world, where central banks kind of said, trust us and give us all this slack and let us do everything, we'll save you. And now central banks are saying, well, hey, we can't do any more. We've run out of tools. We need your help. It's your fault. The government's not doing enough. So I think that this is a story that's going to continue to play out in a number of countries. And it's never been more important to protect that nest egg and educate yourself about your wealth. So big thanks to our sponsor, New Brighton Capital. They've been helping a number of you guys set up your self-managed super fund, or even just take advantage of that free session they've got there over the phone. Have a chat with them and see if this is for you. We had that great interview with Mike this week to talk about everything that he sees going on and how you can use crypto to diversify your SMSF. Now, another cool story coming out of Australia here, where the ACCC are cracking down on Apple and other big tech giants. We've all heard about, light bulb theory or planned obsolescence, where these instruments are made to break after a year or 2 years, or they issue software updates which you're forced to download, and then it doesn't work as well. It's really forcing you to buy a new device every year or two. So interesting to see what comes of this. If Australia maybe do a landmark case, and how Apple are going to fight that with their lawyers and deep pockets. Now, Apple CEO Tim Cook has been selling millions of dollars of shares. So again, I covered this last week. We're seeing some of the big boys in the largest companies in the world sell a lot of their shares. And it's just one of those signs that they think, this is as good as it gets. We've seen Warren Buffett do it. He's now sitting on a record stockpile of cash, not seen since before the GFC. So this is what the wealthy do. They scoop in when there's blood in the streets, when everyone was scared, and now they're sitting on cash. Now they've sold when prices are near record highs. They've been slowly selling, and we've really seen that, in the statistics as well. So a lot of the fake money, the share buybacks, there's all these artificial reasons why prices are at record highs, and a lot of cash is on the sidelines in these investment funds, and they're waiting to swoop in again if we do have a correction. Now, Norway's sovereign wealth fund is another example of this. Where do you park your money? And the US is the cleanest dirty shirt in the laundry. I'm going to keep saying this because as other economies and nations slow, a lot of people are going to look to the US to get higher interest rates or to park their money in the US stock market. Now, developing nations are hurting because of that strong US dollar. Car manufacturers halting production in India. Look, India are having a really tough time of it. We'll get to some crypto news later as well, but this really does hurt those developing nations that have become the manufacturing centers of our economy. Now, Argentina are proposing, another debt restructuring. This will be the 9th time that they've had some sort of default since their independence. So I know we think of Argentina as this country with hyperinflation, but at one stage they were one of the richest countries on paper because of their oil reserves, and they had a lot of money. So this can happen to anyone if you don't have good monetary policy. Look, they issued a 100-year bond, and it's a bit of nonsense, and already we're seeing the US talk about issuing 50 and 100-year treasuries. Why on earth would you need these if everything is going well? There's talk about this in Austria, in Australia as well. So this is just another sign that governments are really getting desperate to try and extend this further. There shouldn't be a need to sell bonds of this duration. Now, at the same time, we've got the US Fed stepping in and buying bonds. So, this is the beginnings of QE. QE isn't necessarily an on or off switch. As we saw here, they began to unwind a little bit of their balance sheet, but this is the first time since back in 2014 where they've become purchasers of bonds again. So it's not a program per se. They haven't called it QE yet, but this may be the first signs, as I've spoken about, that they're going to have to step in a meaningful way, start printing money to buy bonds again. Now, this is at a time when I think the bond blow off top, that bubble has started, if you look at the charts, because we're at 17 trillion of negative yields now. This is going up $1 trillion a week lately. So how much further can this go? And everyone is on one side of the ship where everyone's obsessed with bonds, even though they have negative yields, as I spoke about in that video, because they think the price of the bonds are going to go up. They're just expecting more people to buy them. So it is literally becoming a pyramid scheme, a Ponzi scheme, if you want to think of it that way. So as soon as something changes, we get a hint of inflation or a better place to park their money, there's trillions of dollars that it's going to be running towards the exits in the bond market there. Now, obviously, gold and silver have been big beneficiaries of this. They don't have a negative yield. So silver finally breaking out this week. Tremendous run there, even better in Aussie dollar terms. And we did get this news that there's been a lot of fake gold bars slipping into world markets. So if you haven't done research about this, tungsten is the same weight roughly as gold and similar appearance. We have gold coated bars with different metals in the middle. So there's a few ways around it. And I think, Digex, Ainsley, a few of these companies that are, minting gold and then issuing those tokens, getting it audited. This is going to be the new normal. None of this gold in Fort Knox. We don't know how much is there. It's going to have to be transparent because of fake gold bars slipping into world markets. Now, this was a cool article from CNBC that's saying that the Fed are going to have to cut interest rates 5 more times before April next year. So that's, around 8 months' time. And the Fed are talking about their one cut being a mid-cycle adjustment. It's one and done. Now, we know their track record has been absolutely horrible. So the Fed were talking about getting interest rates back to 3 or 4% in 2019, a few years ago. Now, here we are in 2019, and again, the Fed, the dot plots, this is the different members of the FOMC saying that, yeah, we think interest rates are going to be back at 2.5% long term. Probably next year, the one after, things are going to get great again. But if you look at what the market is saying, the smartest money in the world, they're predicting that the US is cutting just like everyone else. They're going to be back at 1%, probably back at 0 or negative interest rates in the coming years. So the Fed have just got no credibility. The same with the RBA in Australia. They're missing their inflation targets. They've been wrong with their Fed funds rates. So it's crazy stuff. I'm really getting sick of some of the nonsense that central banks continue to put out. Now, this is leading to civil unrest in a lot of countries. People are upset with governments, banking, financial infrastructure. So Hong Kong firing live rounds to quell protesters, chaos in the streets. This is a situation which seems to be heating up every weekend. And I've got friends in Hong Kong. Look, they tell me it's not that bad and the media is overstating it at the moment. But I think this is going to continue to worsen, particularly with those trade tensions and a few of the things that China are pulling. There's a lot of unhappy citizens over there. Now, this has crept into a number of countries. We've covered the yellow vests on the channel, and we see the Brits taking to the streets. So Boris came out and suspended Parliament. He went to the Queen. So this is, the unelected making the decisions on behalf of the people. It's crazy to watch this unfold. So is there going to be a hard Brexit? Are those people going to turn to Bitcoin, more civil unrest? Who knows where this is all heading? Now, Brussels thinks that helicopter money should be in the picture now for the ECB. So if you don't know what that is, you can think of it as people's QE. So rather than the banks printing, getting that money that's printed from the Fed, buying bonds off them and, even ETFs and everything in Japan, give out money to the people rather than the banks next time around. But the danger of doing that is inflation. And if we get out of control inflation, then central banks have probably got an even bigger headache. But people want money. They don't want the banks to get the money. So this is the sort of conundrum that central banks are in these days. So we're going to continue to see the rise of these, left and right parties because people want to try something different. And this is the UK's first, crypto policy revealed by one of their larger parties. And I think a lot of the youth, these people want something different. And crypto is probably a great way to get votes. Now, this has forced Coinbase to move to euro-based accounts because of Brexit. So we have to remember that this does affect real businesses, everything that is going on at the moment. Now, what this leads to is people moving to those friendlier jurisdictions. So we've spoken about Portugal. Look, I've got friends that have moved out of Australia to Europe and now to Portugal for this very reason, because they've got, lower taxes for crypto trading and payments, and they've got a better tax structure all round to run a business out of. So this just all sucks money out of these countries that are asking too much, and governments trying to milk, especially the lower to middle class, small, medium business, where we see the really large businesses not really sort of paying much tax a lot of the time. And I think a lot of people are going to end up moving to these countries, particularly if there's nothing great happening, a recession or just sideways as we've seen in Japan. Why wouldn't you move, particularly the wealthy? Why wouldn't you move to some of these other countries where it's a lot cheaper to live with your family? You've got your wealth. Why not move there? Now, into the crypto news. So Craig Wright has been in the headlines this week. We saw the judge rule that Craig is going to have to hand over half his coins. And that is really important, that little nuance, that if Craig doesn't have any coins or doesn't have the key to those coins, what is he handing over if he's handing over half? So, half of nothing is still nothing. So there's still a long way to go as this chapter unfolds. Look, the climate case, I think that you'd have to say that Dr. Craig Wright did lose that, but the market's still got a lot of, I think, concerns going forward, with the Tulip Trust, if these are going to hit the market. Expect more headlines, and Craig Wright always has a surprise up his sleeve. Now, this is a cool little gaming project that I've covered a couple of years ago. It's actually one that I own, and PlayKey are very close to launching their decentralized streaming service where you can play any game from any computer. So here we see here a really low-end computer or even a laptop, and you can play high-end games with no lag as long as you've got a good internet connection. So really cool little project. People can earn this token by streaming those games, contributing their computing power to the network. So look, this one isn't necessarily listed on any big or even medium exchanges, but that's not really the thing that I'm looking at all these days. It's trying to pick projects where if they succeed, it's a home run. And this is one that's been very patient, working hard behind the scenes. I interviewed them in Gaming Week. So yeah, check that service out if you're a gamer and let me know what you think. Now, Hashgraph have partnered up with one of the world's largest aircraft carriers here, Boeing. So this is pretty cool. Hashgraph are launching their beta version and listing their token very soon. So look, they raised a lot of money. It garnered a lot of hype. I did an interview with them, and I still think they've got a fair few headwinds. So everyone thinks that their solution is best. It's solved all these problems, and every blockchain will tell you that they're better than the other one. So look, Hashgraph might be flavor of the month. Let's see if we have any other big companies partner with them and actually start to use that technology and the token. Now, Decred is one that I've really liked lately. They've got a good governance protocol, and they've added privacy. So I've spoken about these older projects that have been very busy building, and they can absorb the technology and upgrade from other projects that have tried and tested it. So great to see Decred adding privacy there. Look, Litecoin is another one I think we'll get to in just a second, which is probably going to add privacy as well. So look, Gemini joining with Silvergate Exchange here for money transfers. So they've been pretty bullish in that space, launching USDC and trying to become a bit of a bank, and they really lost market share in terms of people using their stable coin. Now, Gemini have recently come to Australia, so look, everyone is trying to get into this money transfer remittance space, whether it's Libra. We've seen the world's first licensed crypto banks in Switzerland. I know Litecoin bought a stake in a bank. I just spoke about them possibly implementing privacy. So look, Charlie Lee is going to have to bankroll some of the Litecoin Foundation. We know he made a heap of money from selling near the top, and that's his passion project. So I don't think he's going to let Litecoin, default anytime soon, particularly while there's still plenty of new things to play with and experiment and implement. So look, Ripple is the one that's originally trying to crack into this cross-border payment system. There's more and more competition every day now, but look, US banking giant PNBC starting to use RippleNet. So again, I read this story. There's not any mention of using the XRP token just yet. I know that's what XRP investors ultimately want, but they seem to have had a lot of good news lately, but price just refuses to budge. Now, India is one of those countries that probably needs those payment systems the most, and they've banned cash, and they're looking to outright ban crypto altogether, which is really upsetting to hear. I've heard rumors that they want to make any form of holding crypto completely illegal. So hopefully some common sense comes into it here, and the people step up and push back, just like we've seen with the cash ban in Australia. People raise their voice when these things get into the mainstream narrative and they start to hear about what's happening. So look, nearly 10% of India's richest investors are looking to increase their allocation into crypto. So whether or not they have to do this and park money in it outside of the Indian system if they ban it, but they know that something bad is coming for their local economy, their local currency. And why would you not want to park in, they love gold in India. We've seen art, fixed income, stocks, real estate, just anything else other than sitting in fiat currency in these developing nations, which are going to devalue their currencies to pay off their debts. Now, this Plus token is the latest Ponzi scheme that's blown up. There's plenty of other new ones going around at the moment, guys. These always blow up no matter how good you think they are. And disappointing to see Hubai apparently processing 50% of all those withdrawals. So when they have all this money, they need to launder it. They need to get it out. They need to cash out. So normally the technology to track these and shut them down and alert the exchanges has got better and better. So let's see what Hubai say about this, whether or not they were aware of it. You just don't know what some exchanges are thinking these days, whether it's all about profits or not. So we got more news about China's digital currency. Again, another one racing to launch their own system and replace the banks through digital currency. So Binance is saying that this is going to be a two-tiered system. You're not necessarily going to need a bank account and KYC to use this. So it sounds a little bit different to what Libra were proposing. And there's so many different implementations of this. I really think every bank and corporation are going to launch their own cryptocurrency. And at the end of the day, people are going to turn back to Bitcoin, I think, once they realize that all these are just a short-term distraction. The other bit of news I wanted to mention from Binance was they have introduced that earn feature if you're lucky enough to be one of the people that wins. At the moment, it's only a small allocation for people that can stake to earn that 15% annualized rewards. If you want to know what other platforms you can use to earn some rewards, I did that DeFi lending platform. Look, I thought this one would have got a lot more views at a time when it's pretty hard to make profits. There's not a lot of trading been happening lately, and being able to get 10% plus earning out stable coins from your hardware wallet is a pretty attractive option. So look, I hope you guys do take the time to check that one out, because at the moment you can get anywhere between 17, it also got up to 24% the other day, annual returns for lending out some stable coins there. Now, one of the lenders that I had to cut from that tutorial was actually Dharma. So they've pivoted to more of a banking model, stablecoin savings account. So they've partnered up with Compound Finance, I believe, here, because they ran into a lot of issues themselves. I think I spoke about this one a few weeks ago, where you're having to, fund and pay out higher fees than are naturally available to attract customers, because that DeFi space, they were one of the earlier people in there and they just didn't have the customers and the demand. So there's a lot of competition now. And what we're finding is some of these projects partner together in the borrowing and lending space, and a bit of a pivot here, but I'm looking forward to seeing what Dharma can do with version 2. Now, you guys know the DeFi space is red hot at the moment. I think, Bitcoin is that ultimate store of value, and they're working on Lightning Network as a bit of payment system. But in terms of decentralized finance, whether it's lending or loans, that is all being built on Ethereum, and you just can't argue with that. So 2.7 million ETH are now locked in DeFi apps, and that's just one little part of the Ethereum ecosystem. We know there's all sorts of industries where people are trying to disrupt and build on top of Ethereum, and we have proof of stake coming. So I just see so many ETH being locked up in these different use cases and utilities going forward. And I know everyone thinks ETH is dead at the moment, but I put out this tweet, whether it's Google, Microsoft, Andreas Antonopoulos writing books about it, Vitalik and the team are talking about the research being complete for the move to ETH 2.0, hundreds of dApps, thousands of developers. I just don't know how people can say that Ethereum's dead. There's just so much going on in this space. DeFi is just one example of a great ecosystem that is emerged out of the Ethereum community. But into the Bitcoin news, where Bakkt announced that they will start accepting deposits on September 6. Set for launch on September 23. Look how bad sentiment is at the moment in the markets. Everyone is telling me that prices are going much, much lower. We'll get to technical analysis in just a second, but these are the sort of things where sentiment can change fairly quickly. Everyone got so excited about the Bitcoin futures in that really caused a big run up in price, and obviously it went down after futures launch, but I think that was for different reasons. So keep an eye on those headlines this week. If we get a lot of money flowing into Bakkt, that can be something that does flip sentiment. Now, if you want to know how those professional investors are thinking about digital assets, this was one of the best interviews I've ever done. And I was a bit surprised that, this has got less than 2,000 views as of this weekend. So some of those interviews we've done with Raoul Poole got 75,000 views on YouTube, 25,000 downloads on our podcast. Guys, if you haven't listened to this yet, please make sure you head over and check it out. Tyrone and I spoke about so many interesting things. He talks about Wall Street, the GFC, the games that the banks are playing again. I promise you'll enjoy that interview we did with Tyrone. Now, before we get into the technical analysis, I do want to thank this week's sponsor, and that's FTX. So these guys have got a great platform. I've got friends that are working there. I wouldn't recommend this to you guys unless I've started personally using it. So BitMEX, the engine there is terrible. These guys have got that troll box there if you want to have a bit of fun and chat with people while you're trading. But it's these indexes which I love. So whether it's the altcoin index, the mid caps, the shitcoin index, you can short these if you think altcoins are going to go down, and you can do that on leverage. So really easy interface here. Look, have a play around with it, guys. I think this is going to be an exchange that continues to bring out better products. I've got a link in the description for you below to get a massive discount on fees, and I've got an interview coming out with the founder this week to talk about all the options and other indexes that they're going to launch for you guys going forward. So into the technical analysis, and last week we were talking about this trend line. If we go to the daily, we've been in this tightening range, and there's a few different ways you can sort of draw this trend line here, but all eyes have been on it. And if we just zoom in a little bit there, when we did break it, it was a bit of a bloodbath, and that was probably the one trade that stood out this week. And then we dip down into this zone, 9.4 to 9,000, and it's acted as support and people buying every time so far. Now, at this stage, that daily RSI hasn't dipped into oversold. It's very common for that to happen in the bull market. So this next key turning point here we've got is the 9th of September. Now, we know that Bakkt launch is coming on the 6th of September, but every time we've got oversold on the 4-hour, you've at least had a good swing trade here again. So it played out nicely back here with a big bounce. Look, this bounce was smaller and the volume has been terrible. So what that tells me as a swing trader is, yes, even though there was a good little trade here, this doesn't look like there's going to be any follow through at the moment. So a bit of whipsaw today, but very much everyone expecting that next leg down. If it gets down through that area, that's when I think people are going to start to get really fearful. So look, there's been plenty of support back here, 8,000, 7,000 in a worst case scenario. That brings us down to that 40% number. This is all still really normal action in a bull market, and I just don't understand why people are calling for $4,000 or new lows, and all of a sudden everyone is really bearish. When if you look at this, volume has been declining over this sort of few corrective weeks, and we're still in these moving averages. It all looks pretty healthy to me, and we had that monthly close. Now, if you want to put your technical analysis hat on, this does look pretty terrible. These big long wicks mean that there's a lot of profit taking, and at the moment I think we're probably due for, whether it's just another green week or a green month, but some sort of sideways chop. I just don't know how we can keep going down at this pace with these $1,000 weeks into the red, because when I put my fundamentals hat on and sentiment, I think there's a lot of people that missed out that would love to buy more Bitcoin, and they've been picking up a little bit here. Even the traders are not wanting to step in, but if we get down here and get oversold on the daily time frame, we get that weekly RSI get really negatively oversold, we're going to see the traders step in as well as the investors if we get down to those levels. So look, the other thing I just want to mention quickly is that ETH BTC pair. That is what we want to keep an eye on to have a look if altcoins are any chance of outperforming Bitcoin in the short term. We've got that altcoin index, that mid-cap index, and the shitcoin index if you guys want to add those to your charts from FTX. So look, that's it for this week, guys. Head over to nuggetsnews.com.au if you want to join our community. Otherwise, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share these videos around, and thanks for tuning in, guys. Cheers.